This week's Megacan: should Germany remove the word race from its constitution? What happened in Dessau 20 years ago and why you should care? And what did they inscribe on the cross on the Schloss again?
Evening, everybody. It's time for another episode of Megan's Megacan. My name is Megan and I'm here on a lovely, warm, almost summer's evening, feels like, in Berlin, in partnership, as always, with Ex-Berliner magazine and my lovely co-host, Konrad Werner.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm fine, very well.
Good.
Okay, right, so I've got my shorts on for the first time.
You do. You look very summery. So
Yeah.
I said when I arrived. It was nice.
I don't actually own a Hawaii shirt, but this is the closest I've got.
A Hawaiian shirt. I love that you call it a Hawaii shirt.
What is it? Is it a Hawaiian
I
shirt?
think Hawaiian, because you're sort of describing the shirt rather than it being the sort of official shirt of Hawaii. So I don't know.
I thought that's what they all wear. I thought they all wear the same one. Yeah, I thought that was the...
I don't know. I've never been to Hawaii.
One. No, I haven't either.
Well, I would like to go. It's quite exciting today, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Why is it exciting? Because you told me, because you know these things. I'm just here for the booze.
Well, because I have to upload it. I always see what number we're on. And today we are on number 50.
A 50th show.
Yeah, imagine that.
I would not have imagined that when...
That's mad.
It was actually literally 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Oh, God.
It was... I can't believe you can't remember. It was summer 2018. It was about July 2018.
No, it was this time because it was Hannah Clark's birthday. And it's Hannah Clark's birthday today. Hi, Hannah Clark. She always listens, so she'll be pleased with that. She's good. She's good fun. But yeah, so it was exactly 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And
that's amazing.
The idea for this podcast was born out of me. I didn't really know you very well then, but I knew that you were a political journalist, and I knew that I didn't know anything about politics, and I was intoxicated.
Yeah, and we were sitting on the banks of the canal.
We were in some club. Remember clubs? Do you remember those, everyone? We were sitting outside of one of those. Yeah. I was like, if I bring 2 Megacans to your house, because I'm like wildly embarrassed that I don't know enough about politics, will you just fill me in every Friday? And here we are.
Here we are, 2 years later, 50 shows later.
50 shows later.
Still doing it.
Holy God, that's a lot of Megacans.
Yeah.
Oh, wowee.
What's that, 100? It's like one each.
That's, whoa.
We've drunk between us 100 Megacans.
That's...
Oh, they're live on air.
I mean, I've had a lot more in my actual life as well. But anyway, yeah. So that's cool.
Yeah, that's very exciting.
That's exciting. I think we should have a drink to celebrate.
Yeah,
what better way to celebrate that than with more Megacans?
What are we having?
Well, since we got to 50 shows, the big time, I call it, I got the fancy versions of our favourite ones.
Oh.
So I have a Bombay Dry and Tonic, and you have a Johnny and Ginger.
Yes.
Yes,
Get in.
You know these are fancy. They're not matte. Look, those are frosty. Your Späti is good. They're frosty and they're $3.50.
Oh yeah.
Which is good mega price for the
That's
the
nice,
Spätis.
Yeah. I feel like putting it on my forehead like an advert.
Oh God, it's warm.
Yeah. It's humid.
But you know these are fancy not because of a matte can, which is the other thing of fanciness, but because of the sort of like muted colours, I think.
Yeah, that's always that always suggests class.
If you compare them to the complete tackiness of the cans we were drinking last week, not bad, but...
Oh, mine was horrible.
Your Sex on the Beach?
Yeah, I didn't like it.
Oh, I feel really bad. Don't really.
It was... But yeah, I like this. It's sort of classy...
muted kind of
colours.
Oh.
It's the kind of sort of saying, it doesn't have to be beautiful.
No,
and brash.
It's
I
like
can be understated and still know that you will buy me.
Yes.
Cheers.
Cheers. Oh, God.
Lovely. Happy 50th.
Happy 50th, indeed. On a slightly less exciting note.
Well, we were going to say the one reason that this all started was because 2 years ago there was a crisis in the German government.
There was.
And do you remember who started that crisis?
I do. It's my favourite little nemesis, Horst Seehofer.
Yeah.
Who at the time was...
I mean,
no. Is he still in the same job?
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
Well, he's lost one of his other jobs. He's lost two of his other jobs, but he's still doing the main job.
So the main job that he does, he's the interior minister, but he was also at that time the leader of the CSU.
Yeah.
Which is the even more conservative wing of the CDU, the Christian Democratic Union, which is insane.
Well, the Bavarian part of it.
Yeah, it's the Bavarian part of it, yeah.
And he was also the state premier of Bavaria at the time. And now he's just interior minister, and now he's already said he's going to retire at the end of this legislative period, which will be next year.
I feel like we've really come on a little journey. We'll have to have a celebration next year for when he retires. We'll have a little retirement party. Get him a ship in a boat, ship in a Megacan. Yeah. You wouldn't even have to put the ship in because you can't see through them.
I could
it's
see
just an empty Megacan on a plinth.
I could see Horst Seehofer on a dinghy on a canal with a sun hat on.
Yeah.
In his retirement.
It'd be really funny to get
cooler,
him on.
One of those floating coolers full of Megacans.
He'd love a Megacan
paddling along
with our Horst.
Yeah, I think he probably would. Because you've warmed to him a little bit over the years. Would that be fair?
No, I've warmed to him because I've literally just read a news article in which he said he was open to discussion. Well, why don't we start talking about that?
Okay.
Even though it's number 3 on my list of 4, but it's fine.
Yeah, we're
getting very professional now in that I actually have a list of things that we're supposed to talk about that I then tend to ignore.
Right. So it seems natural now, though, to start with the fact that the Justice Minister Christine Lambrecht of the SPD has decided that she would like to have the term race scrapped from the German Basic Law, the Constitution, where this is the Article 3 of the Constitution, which is about equality. And Article 3, Paragraph 3 says, no person shall be favoured or disfavoured because of sex, parentage, race, language, homeland and origin, faith, or religious or political opinions. Plus, no person shall be disfavoured because of disability. That's the official English translation. It says disfavoured, but they probably mean like disadvantaged.
Yeah.
And now, so there's a debate that has been started, and already 3 major parties are in favour of scrapping the word race out of that list. Mm-hmm. But then what do you replace it with? Do you replace it with anything? And that is like a bigger debate. And also, obviously, the CDU and the FDP and the AFD probably don't want it replaced at all.
Well, the FDP is just like, is this about money? If not, what am I doing here? When do I get out? When do I go get to hug people that are going to give me money? I was a bit funny about this when I first heard it, but I've sort of come around, and I think I sort of got a bit funny because I was a bit like, is this the same kind of thing of like when people are like, I don't see race? And you're like, well, if you don't see that, then you're kind of like denying the existence of like racism and stuff, and you're denying the experience of people of color. But I have come around to it now, and I think let's get rid of it. It's a weird racist term, but exactly, what do we replace it with? And some people have been calling for this for quite a while. The ISD, which I'm not going to forget what that stands for.
The Initiative Schwarze Menschen in Deutschland.
Genau.
I think.
They would like to have it replaced with some kind of wording that has kind of the word racist in it, or racism or something, because
the word race is problematic because it implies that there is a biological definition.
Yeah.
And that was what people thought not very long ago, and that was what people thought probably when they wrote the original constitution. And obviously they were this constitution was written just after the Nazis and everything. They were trying to like rebuild Germany.
When is that?
1949.
God, I feel like I should have. What have you been doing for the past 2 years that I didn't know that?
But when they wrote the constitution,
to be fair, you've probably told me about 7 times, and then I've had a mega and completely forgot.
Well, there was this because of the war. They had to kind of rebuild the country a bit.
Yeah, I was thinking of this question to myself. Yeah.
So.
But like the penal code and stuff still has been around for a longer time. They just haven't had a constitution, yeah?
Yeah, laws in general, they were more complicated. Like some of them are older, some of them are like from the 1870s, and some of them were just made recently. But they didn't just scrap all the laws. They didn't just say we're not going to have any laws now and
Start over, tear it all up. Well,
it'll take
maybe you
ages.
should have with paragraph 218 and paragraph 219A.
For example,
but we're
and
not
there were
talking about that today.
there were actually quite a lot of examples of laws that were made in the 1930s that are still in Germany. So they're
They just
kind of-
wiped them out.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
So
this debate has been opened up. The Justice Minister, she's like, right, let's talk about this now. Horst Seehofer, from the brief paragraph that I've just read, had said that he's like conversation ready, as opposed to just saying something massively out of touch and a bit racist.
Yeah.
So I say, Horst,
well,
you
that
didn't drive me into a spluttering rage. So for a Bavarian politician this week, maybe doing quite well. I don't know.
Well, that is partly because he's no longer the state premier of Bavaria, and he doesn't really feel like he needs to like shore up the far right. You know, he doesn't feel like he needs to like try and win far right votes over. So he's not like when he was being all racist and far and right wing in 2018, like when he wanted the whole
That's
government
even
crisis.
Worse.
Well, there's a politician. I mean, what are you going to say? They're all
Don't
just...
be racist. No, this is the thing. Like, we can't just keep being like, oh, well, you know, he's got to get votes. No.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Unacceptable human behavior. It's not how it is.
But the crisis at the time was all about whether they were going to have a new immigration law. And he threatened to bring down the government, to defy Merkel over whether or not to shut down the border.
Yes.
And he thought that he by doing that, because Bavaria had a state election that year, he thought he would stop people voting for the AfD. Anyway, so that's probably why he's being a bit soft and cuddly about this.
I think also
this
he
thing
may
about
just have like...
what he really thinks is like irrelevant. I mean, who knows what he really thinks?
I think he thinks, how long do I have before I retire on a full whack?
He's basically just sitting,
counting out the days.
he's watching the clock in his office.
He is
every day.
That's all there is an office, just a clock, an empty desk. Maybe one of those like ding ding things with the balls. Maybe one of those Zen gardens. His like wife has bought him in sort of desperation.
I don't know.
Anyway, okay, well that's interesting, and we're going to see how this debate, I guess, pans out. But the other thing that and following on kind of from what we were talking about last week, a little bit more talking about kind of police brutality and things like that. And we talked about the big demo that happened last week, Alex. There was like 15,000 people there. You did mention that there had been like 93 arrests, but what we didn't talk about was that there have been accusations of the police showing kind of like undue amounts of force and kind of targeting or allegedly being seen to target protesters of colour and also some minors. People of colour who are under 18 as well.
Yeah, I saw some...
I'm not delighted with that, obviously.
No. I saw some Twitter videos of people being roughly pushed into a police van. Yeah.
And what was your take? Like, does it seem reasonable? Did they seem to be putting up?
I mean, it was like a 10-second video. I mean, it didn't look bad. I mean, it probably wasn't a good situation.
Yeah.
And I think, I've
been thinking about that this week, and I'm just like, do we need to have police at demos?
This is a whole fascinating debate because, as you rightly asked, what are the police for?
What is the point of the police?
And that is a question that people are asking all over the place.
Yes.
And they're supposed to be there to sort of like protect social order.
Yeah.
That's their job. Like they're supposed to, like, if there's a protest happening and say someone registers an anti-protest or like an opposing protest, which sometimes happens, they're supposed to like keep the two sides apart and make sure they don't start fighting. And that was the case
on Saturday. There were several white supremacy neo-Nazi marches also registered in Berlin.
Yeah. So obviously you sometimes need the police in that situation to stop people actually fighting in the street.
Yes. But that wasn't the videos we were seeing on Saturday, was it? And like, this is my point, because I can guess, and that seems like a completely logical and reasonable argument. But I've sort of been thinking this week, like, none of that stuff, like those arrests and like people being whatever, or, you know, and whether they were arrested because they were like provoking the police or throwing stuff at them, whatever. If the police just hadn't been there, I don't know.
It would have been all fine.
I don't know that. But I do think we have this kind of accepted understanding, and I want to make it clear, like the reform of the police and also the defunding and like dismantling of those structures is a debate that's been happening for a long time, and it's kind of just coming into our like white privilege consciousness now. But it is kind of an interesting question, and it's one of these things like it's so inconceivable for us to imagine, because it seems to be part of society, doesn't it? Like, oh, well, you have to have the police, you have to have an army, you have to have,
yeah,
you know,
no, it's
schools.
True.
Do you?
Do we
need to be doing any of this?
I think this is a very exciting time in history because people are beginning to ask those questions, like, what do we actually need? Mm-hmm. And what do we need to do? It's the same with the coronavirus. It's like, do people actually need to do all this work all the time?
No.
You know?
Probably not.
Do they need to commute from one place to another, or do they need to go? Can't they just do it at home? Can't.
Yeah,
like,
or a lot of people can't. Like, some people do need to go and move there. Please don't make me work from home coronavirus for any longer. I cannot. I can't face it. I know they're on their phones, but I can't see it, and it's killing me.
Yeah. And
teaching.
It's true. I think this is like very like people are beginning to ask fundamental systemic questions about what kind of society do we want, and what institutions do we need, and how do we organize things.
Yeah.
And and people are starting to come up with alternative plans and alternative models of how to do things. I think it is there's a kind of a revolutionary atmosphere, I think.
Yeah.
Talking about the police, I was in Dessau yesterday.
Yes.
For the anniversary. There was a Mozambican who was murdered 20 years ago, and it was the anniversary, and there was a bit more attention given to this anniversary than other years, partly because it was 20, but also obviously because it's like this is a moment when there are a lot of, you know, anti-racist demonstrations happening everywhere, and there was a sort of a memorial part to the beginning, and then later there was a Black Lives Matter demonstration in that area, and there was the people who gave speeches were very like, the police are. It was like there was a tense moment because there were a few cops there, because they were like, they have to be there all demos. That's like the part of their job, I guess. They're supposed to be about.
It is for now.
So
yes.
There was some police. There was about. It wasn't a very big demo. It was about 150 people, and it was peaceful, and people were socially distanced, and everyone wore a mask because those are the rules. And but there was the guy who did the speech was like he seemed to know one of the victims of the police violence that happened 15 years ago, also in Dessau, and he said anyone who joins the police is evil. Basically, I mean, he basically said that all the police should take off their uniforms because we don't trust you. And he was a man of color, and he said like the immigrant community and the black community do not trust the police in Germany. Yeah. Especially because of this one incident that happened in Dessau that we mentioned last week with Uri Jallo, who was a Sierra Leonean asylum seeker, and that feeling, that emotional feeling, that sense that they were betrayed by the police, partly because no one has been convicted. No one has been convicted of anything serious in that case. Like there was one conviction for negligent manslaughter, but it was just like a 10,000 euro fine. It wasn't anything. Yeah, and there is like this, and they was just saying, we can't, like this guy I spoke to, he said when that happened, people were like, where is the safest place in this city? Surely the police station is supposed to be the safest place in the city. Yeah. And he said, if we can't go to the police when there's a problem, how can you expect us to participate in this society if we don't think you can keep us safe? This is
the thing, and the perspective that I've been talking about, like, or that we've just been discussing, of like, But the police, they've always been there. We have this idea of the role. That is a very white perspective. Like, that's one perspective of many. And black people in Dessau don't feel like they can go, obviously, to the police, or that they have a very different role in their world.
Yeah.
Because you may end up, like, discovered, like, shackled and bound and burned horribly in a police cell.
Yeah.
Which is what happened to Uri Jallo. Tell me a little bit more about the other case, or the case that happened 20 years ago.
So this was, he was called Alberto Adriano. He was a Mozambican, and he was beaten to death, essentially, in the street by 3 neo-Nazis who got drunk, and it was like it was like a clear-cut case. Uri Jallo is still like no one's been convicted, no one knows exactly what happened, but this case was like really clear-cut. The 3 guys were arrested the same night, they confessed, there was a short trial, and one of them was sentenced to life in prison. The other 2 were 16 years old, they were underage, so they only got 9 years each. But it was just a really, really like vicious, horrible beating, and he died. It took him 3 days to die. He was in a coma, and at the time, this is in 2000. It happened June 11th, 2000, and at the time, it was a really big case in Germany. A lot of the things happened. Like Gerhard Schröder went there, and that was like seen as a big political, like a political statement, because that was the first time that a chancellor had gone to like a racist murder thing. There was a concert, like there was all the things that we're kind of used to seeing now, like demos, concerts that happened, like the Lone Tile Bar. That kind of all started 20 years. That happened 20 years ago because of the Dessau case. Yeah. There were new initiatives, like the federal government started funding anti-Nazi education kind of initiatives to try and, it was the first time that it was recognized that in East Germany there's a big problem with neo-Nazis and with
in the year 2000.
Yeah, there was. There were other cases before. There was like Zollingen, but this was the first time that it was there was a sense that something's got to, we've got to deal with it directly in a little bit. Anyway, but the people I spoke to there from the Multicultural Centre, they were saying like, yeah, that was all very well that Gerhard Schröder came and there was all this attention, but no one's heard of him anymore. And they do a commemoration every year, and hardly anyone turns up. Yeah. And they said that, and he said that we're still left alone. Like the neo-Nazi violence continued. Like it was really difficult. It was always really difficult for asylum seekers in this town anyway.
Then like 5 years later, in the same town, in the police station of that town, the horrific murder of Uri Jallo in police custody.
Yeah,
happens. So like, I get that it's really good that stuff happened and whatever, but it's 3 neo-Nazis beating black man to death is a very, like you said, clear cut. This is racist. Neo-Nazis are bad. This is terrible. Let's do something about it.
Yeah.
But you have to then, and what we haven't done is follow it up with like the it's again this like argument that we get, it's just a few bad apples. It's not.
Yeah.
Because if you have a town where your police service is going to tie a man up and burn him in cell number 5 years after that, like, that's not a few bad apples.
Yeah.
And
I spoke to a few people on the streets, a few, Germans who remembered. They all remembered the Adriano case. They all remembered the Yellow case. No one went to the commemoration. Like, I didn't see any white people at the commemoration who weren't there for official reasons. Like, there were a few local politicians from the Green Party. There was someone from the different NGOs, but there were like I didn't see anyone at the commemoration who wasn't like somehow politically engaged with it.
It wasn't like a community,
no.
Right?
But they all knew about it, and I said like, so what about far right in this town? What is it? And they were saying like, oh, it was an isolated incident. It doesn't.
You can't say it's an isolated incident about 2 incidents.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and then they were just all like, oh, but he, And and then they would say, "Oh, Uri Jallo," but I heard that he used to sell drugs in the park. There was this kind of like they're relativizing it. That's what I heard.
And he did. But
that's partly because he couldn't do anything else because he was an asylum seeker.
So
he wasn't
people
allowed to get a
I know
job.
that were like in college, like university, like it doesn't. It's an unrelated.
Anyway, the Adriano case is also slightly interesting because he was a Vertragsarbeiter in the GDR, and that is an unusual. That kind of people forget that there were workers from other countries in the GDR, and they had like little communities, and they had, but they like the West Germany had the Gastarbeiter, and they were normally Turkish.
Yeah.
The East Germany had Vertragsarbeiter, which meant contract workers, because East Germany did contracts with all these different countries, but they only took people from socialist countries, and one of them there was like Mozambique, Vietnam, Cuba, Algeria, Angola.
Okay.
And a few from China and North Korea as well, but those were mainly the countries. And they were like shipped over. They were like sorted out, put into different factories. This is also happening in West Germany, but this is and they were they couldn't choose where they were going to live. They couldn't choose where they were going to work. They were just like sorted out into different places. Like it was all organized from above, by the state, and they were segregated. Like they all lived together. They didn't live with German workers, and they were also segregated by sex. So they weren't allowed to live. Like even married couples were separated. Like they weren't allowed to share.
Oh my god!
Yeah, the women and the men had to be separated. And they lived in home.
That's just so dehumanizing, isn't it? Like. Oh.
Yeah, and it was like now how asylum seeker homes are now. Well, like if they haven't wanted a visitor, the visitor would have to sign in. If they wanted to spend the night somewhere else, they would have to mention it. Like it wasn't. They shared rooms of up to 4 people. Anyway, so it was very segregated, and there was a bit of integration in the sense that they had obligatory German lessons, but it was always just German lessons to do with what their work was going to be. It wasn't like, just learning
How
German.
well can you take instruction?
Yeah.
There's not going to be a speaking part of this class. It's going to be making you listening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was always a lot of tension between the Germans and the Vertragsarbeiter in the GDR, and that was like covered over. Like the East German government didn't like to talk about that. They wanted to show very much that they were like the new society, the anti-Nazi society. We're like the fascism is a Western problem, is an imperialist problem. It was like a capitalism. Those things, that racism belongs to the West. We are not racist. But it was clear that they also had a problem, and it was clear that they were there to, and officially, all those workers were there to be educated on how a socialist country works, and they were going to go back. They were going to learn new skills. They were going to learn, and they would be sent back after 5 years or 2 years or whatever, and help to build up their own country.
Lovely.
And
that sounds entirely plausible.
So in a few isolated cases, normally they would go back. A few isolated cases, if they got married or something, people would stay on longer, and that's what happened to this guy, Alberto Adriano. He stayed on, and he had 3 children.
So when did he come over? Because he must have been...
He came in 1988. He was one of the very last Vertragsarbeiters to come, and he was killed in 2000.
And he had 3 children.
He had 3 children, yeah. And it's just horrible. It's really sad. I mean,
that is unbelievably sad on so many, and you just see like the huge levels of intersection between and just all of the systemic horrible things that happen with economics and like developed world. I know those are like problematic concepts, like developed world and developing world and racism and all of that horror just in that story.
Yeah. And a lot of Mozambicans left after that murder. It was a lot. They said that it's not worth staying here.
It's just.
And it's very. Dessau is very small. It's about 80,000 people, and fewer than 4,000 are of foreign background.
Yeah. Okay.
In general, like this, but
Wowee.
so that's
it's just utterly sickening. The two cases that you've sort of talked about with Dessau, where people who come here for, I don't want to say like come here for a better life, because that wasn't the thing. They kind of come because of like economic necessity or whatever. Are
well, they came here because both the guest workers in West Germany and the Vertragsarbeiter in East Germany came here because there weren't enough workers. Like they had a massive labour shortfall. There was like a real economic necessity for more labour.
Yeah. But sort of people who then come out of economic necessity either, and Yuri Jallo was a refugee, and the reason also, as far as I'm aware, that he was having to deal like hash and stuff, is that he wasn't allowed to work. Under, this is what happens with refugees. We'll bring them into the country and then they're in this limbo where they cannot integrate, and then we, and they're segregated in these places, and like you say, they're treated like some kind of criminals. And then we're like, well, they haven't really integrated, so, and it's this horrible treatment when they get here. Horrible treatment, like just being exploited in so many different ways and oppressed in so many ways and denied so many of the things that they thought that they were going to maybe have. And then, like, they end up dead because, when we're done with all of that, all of the systemic kind of like white supremacy shit, well, it's just
do you want to hear one other news story?
No, but please continue.
There's one last thing. Oh no, actually, instead of doing the last story, I wanted to say one thing that I forgot to say 2 weeks ago.
Oh,
do you remember when we did the episode called Schloss with a cross?
Cross on the Schloss.
Cross on the
It's
Schloss.
very hard to say. Cross on the Schloss, yes.
And we were mentioning the kind of why it doesn't really need to have a cross.
So this is the rebuilding of the previous something that is now going to be the Humboldt Forum, and we were a bit cross because they've put a cross on the Schloss, and we're like, that's dumb.
But I didn't mention, because we're talking about, one of our running themes is the decolonialization of Berlin and like the like names and stuff.
Yes, we've been talking quite a lot about that because it's bullshit. Rename that stuff and stop putting crosses on things. Right.
But so there's what I didn't mention was because I didn't realize this until afterwards. There's an inscription on the cross, on the base of the cross that goes all the way around, which they left on. Es ist in keinem anderen Heil, ist auch kein anderer Name den Menschen gegeben, denn in dem Namen Jesu, zur Ehre Gottes des Vaters, dass in dem Namen Jesu sich beugen sollen alle deren Knie, die im Himmel und auf Erden und unter der Erde sind. So, to translate, I'll just translate the second sentence because that's the important sentence. In the name of Jesus, all people shall bend their knees in heaven and on earth, and all those upon the earth beneath, they're basically, people are saying this is not an appropriate inscription to have on a cross on a museum.
Just filled with shit that we robbed from the colonies.
Exactly. That's what I would say.
Guys, what? Seriously, like, what is up with the tone-deaf nature of things? Like, do people not... Like, I have my, like, drunken, patchy, whatever you have been, like, kind enough to explain to me on a Friday afternoon, knowledge of, like, Germany and what's happening. Why do the people in charge seem to have less than me? Why can't they understand, like, the zeitgeist of, like, what is happening and not, like, do stuff like that's disgusting.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
We're going to have to get up there.
Paint over it.
Fucking knock it off. Not paint it off. I'm going up there with a sledgehammer.
That inscription was placed there in 1854 by the King of Prussia, Friedrich Wilhelm IV.
Brilliant. Yeah, fantastic.
But they've decided to put it back up there 3 weeks ago.
Well,
along with the cross that goes with it. It's kind of a controversial thing. They could have just at least left the inscription off.
Like, it just doesn't need to be done. It's stop doing stuff that is so crassly out of touch that I don't even know where to start with it. And on that note, I almost don't want to make people aware of the other thing that I think is crassly out of touch that happened this week, which was that the police in Germany, what have they done, Konrad? Because I texted it to you.
They've made a music video. They've made a happy, funny music video about the coronavirus.
Saying we're not alone, or like we're not going to, what is it called? I refuse to watch it because...
It's like it is a sort of a Schlager song.
I don't care what kind of song is it, but it's like something about you're not left alone, we're not going to leave you alone. We're not going to leave anyone. Wir lassen keinen hier allein. We won't leave anybody here alone.
Yeah, and they have a little police band playing, like a umpire band, and singing, and they walk around Berlin. And
is it just the Berlin police?
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is. As I said, in response to somebody putting that in a WhatsApp group, obviously wanting to brighten up everybody's like crap midweek thing, I was like, let's not forget that these people are state-sanctioned killers.
On that note, we'll have a lovely weekend, everyone.
Yeah, and thank you so much for listening for like 50 whole episodes. That is a lovely, lovely thing. Have a lovely weekend.
Yes.
Wear sunscreen.
And hydrate adequately.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.